The morning sun peeked through the clouds over Carmel by the Sea, California. The small coastal town was just waking up. At 6:30 a.m., Marie's Diner was one of the few places already buzzing with life. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air. The bell above the door jingled as two police officers walked in. Officer Ryan Martinez and Officer James Collins had been partners for 3 years. They patrolled the quiet streets of Carmel together every day. Both men were in their early 30s and full of confidence. Today was Tuesday, and Tuesday meant breakfast at Marie's before their shift. "Morning, Marie," Officer Collins called out to the owner, a kind woman in her 60s who had been running the diner for over 20 years. "Good morning, boys," Marie replied with a warm smile. "The usual?" "You know it," Officer Martinez said, sliding into their favorite booth by the window. The red vinyl seats squeaked under their weight. Their badges caught the light as they settled in. The diner was nearly empty. An elderly couple sat near the door. A young woman typed on her laptop in the corner. And in the far booth, partly hidden, by the shadows sat an older man reading a newspaper. He wore a simple baseball cap pulled low and a weathered brown jacket. His face was mostly hidden behind the newspaper. Marie brought over 2 mugs and filled them with steaming coffee. "Be right back with your food," she said, then walked over to the older man's table. The officers watched as Marie's whole manner changed. She stood straighter. Her smile became more gentle. She spoke softly to the man, who nodded without looking up from his paper. She refilled his coffee cup with care, almost like she was serving royalty. "Well, look at that," Officer Collins said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "The old man's getting the VIP treatment." Martinez glanced over. "Maybe he's a regular." "More than regular," Collins said. "Look how she's acting around him, like he's somebody important." He chuckled. "Must think he's Clint Eastwood or something." Martinez laughed. "Yeah, right, because Clint Eastwood would be sitting alone in Marie's Diner at 6:30 in the morning." "Wearing that ratty old jacket," Collins added, his voice getting a bit louder. "You think that's what Hollywood stars dress like these days?" The elderly couple glanced over at them with disapproving looks, but the officers didn't notice. They were on a roll now. "Maybe we should ask for his autograph," Martinez joked, pretending to hold out a pen and paper. "Excuse me, sir, could you sign this as Dirty Harry?" They both burst out laughing. Collins wiped a tear from his eye. "Make my day," he said in a gruff imitation of the famous line. Marie returned with plates of eggs, bacon, and toast. She set them down with a thud that was louder than necessary. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. "Something wrong, Marie?" Officer Martinez asked, still grinning. Marie leaned in close. "You boys need to lower your voices," she whispered. Her eyes darted toward the man in the corner. "Why? Is he someone special?" Collins asked, picking up his fork. Marie just shook her head and walked away. This made the officers even more curious. "Now I really want to know who this guy is," Martinez said, cutting into his eggs. "Look at him, sitting there all mysterious." The man turned a page of his newspaper. His hands were weathered and strong-looking. He had a gold watch that caught the light. It looked expensive, which didn't match his simple clothes. "Probably just some rich retiree," Collins said with his mouth full. "This town is full of them." "Then why is Marie treating him like he's the president?" Martinez wondered. As they ate, they continued making jokes about the mystery man. They called him Mr. Hollywood and the secret celebrity. Each joke got a little louder than the last. The diner was small. There was no way the man couldn't hear them, but he gave no sign that he was listening. He just sipped his coffee and read his paper. "You know," Collins said, leaning back in the booth. "Clint Eastwood was the mayor here years ago. Maybe that's why these folks think every old guy with a grumpy face must be someone famous." "This town does love him," Martinez agreed. "Remember when we first got assigned here? The training officer took us past his house on the tour, as if we were going to see him taking out his trash or something." Collins laughed. The truth was, both officers were fans of Clint Eastwood's movies. They had watched Dirty Harry and Gran Torino multiple times. They admired his tough guy characters. In fact, both had become police officers partly because of movies like those. "You know what's funny?" Martinez said, lowering his voice slightly. "If that really was Clint Eastwood, we'd be making fools of ourselves right now." "Good thing it's not," Collins replied loudly. "Can you imagine? Hey, Mr. Eastwood, sorry we thought you were just some random old dude." They both laughed again. The young woman with the laptop glanced up at them with an odd expression, then quickly looked back down. The man in the corner folded his newspaper neatly and set it aside. He took a last sip of his coffee. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet. He left money on the table, more than enough for just coffee. A very generous tip. When he stood up, the officers got their first good look at him. He was tall and lean with broad shoulders. His movements were purposeful and strong, not like most men his age. His face was still partly shadowed by the cap, but they could see a strong jaw and deep lines around his mouth. "Huh," Martinez said, quietly. "He does kind of look like—" "Don't be stupid." Collins cut him off. "You think a guy worth millions would be eating alone at Marie's?" The man put on a pair of sunglasses, even though it wasn't very bright in the diner. He nodded to Marie, who was watching from behind the counter. She smiled and nodded back, a look of respect on her face. As the man walked toward the door, he had to pass by the officer's booth. His steps were slow but steady. There was something about the way he moved, confident, unhurried, like he owned the place. When he was right beside their table, Marie came rushing over. "Officers," she said, in a voice that was both polite and cold. "Do you know who that is?" Before they could answer, the man stopped. He turned slightly toward them. Then he took off his sunglasses. The steely blue eyes that stared back at them were unmistakable, eyes that had looked out from movie posters and screens for decades, eyes that had fixed countless criminals with the same intimidating gaze. In movies and apparently now in real life. Martinez's fork clattered onto his plate. Collins choked on his coffee. It was Clint Eastwood. The 94-year-old Hollywood legend and former mayor of Carmel by the Sea looked at them for a long moment. His expression didn't change. He didn't need to say anything. Those eyes said it all. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the elderly couple had stopped eating to watch. The officers' faces turned bright red. Their mouths opened, but no words came out. All their confidence from moments ago had vanished. Eastwood put his sunglasses back on and turned toward the door. He reached for the handle, and that's when everything changed. Time seemed to slow down in Marie's diner. Officer Martinez and Officer Collins sat frozen in their booth, their breakfast forgotten. The great Clint Eastwood stood just feet away from them, his hand on the door handle. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on the young officers like a heavy blanket. Every joke, every loud comment they had made echoed in their minds. They had mocked a living legend, not just any celebrity, but Clint Eastwood himself, the man who had put their small town of Carmel by the Sea on the map, the former mayor who had done so much for the community, the Hollywood icon whose movies had inspired them to become police officers in the first place. "Mr. Eastwood," Officer Collins finally managed to say, his voice cracking. "Sir, we didn't—" Eastwood turned his head slightly, just enough to show he had heard. But he didn't speak. His face remained calm and unreadable behind his sunglasses. The silence was worse than any angry words could have been. Marie stood nearby, her arms crossed, looking disappointed in her regular customers. The elderly couple watched with interest. The young woman with the laptop had stopped typing and was staring openly. "We're very sorry, sir," Officer Martinez said, standing up quickly. His knee hit the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "We had no idea it was you." This was the wrong thing to say. It implied they would only have been respectful if they had known he was famous. Eastwood's mouth tightened just slightly. He turned, back to the door, clearly ready to leave without a word. The officers looked at each other in panic. This couldn't be how it ended. Their embarrassment was complete, but they needed to make it right somehow. Just as Eastwood began to pull the door open, it suddenly pushed inward from the outside. A frantic woman in a blue dress burst in, nearly colliding with the actor. "Help! she cried, her eyes wild with fear. There's been an accident on Ocean Avenue. A car went off the road. There's a family trapped. The atmosphere in the diner changed instantly. The officers' embarrassment was forgotten as their training kicked in. They jumped to their feet. All business now. How many people? Officer Collins asked, already reaching for his radio. 4, I think, the woman said, breathing hard. A couple and 2 children. Their car is hanging off the edge of that steep part near the beach access point. I'll call it in, Martinez said, speaking into his radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Martinez. We need emergency services at Ocean Avenue, South Beach access point. Vehicle over embankment with 4 civilians trapped. Requesting fire and rescue immediately. The radio crackled with a response. Copy that, officers. Fire and rescue are being dispatched. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes might be too long, Collins said quietly to his partner. Martinez nodded grimly. Let's go. They rushed toward the door, which Eastwood was still holding open. As they passed him, they expected him to step aside. Instead, to their surprise, he fell into step behind them. Sir, you should stay here, Officer Collins said over his shoulder. This could be dangerous. Eastwood didn't reply. He simply kept walking with them toward their patrol car parked outside the diner. Mr. Eastwood, Martinez tried again. We appreciate your concern, but I know that stretch of road, Eastwood said, speaking for the first time. His voice was low and gravelly, just like in his movies. Unstable ground. You'll need help stabilizing the vehicle before you can get them out. The officers looked at each other. They were still embarrassed from before, but this was an emergency. And Eastwood was right. They could use all the help they could get. All right, Collins said with a nod. You can ride with us. The 3 men got into the patrol car with Eastwood in the back seat. The morning air was cool and foggy as they sped through the quiet streets of Carmel. The siren wailed, cutting through the peaceful town. Been mayor here for 2 years, Eastwood said as they drove. Dealt with 3 similar accidents on that stretch. The ground there erodes after heavy rain. It had rained the night before. The officers realized this information was valuable. Thank you, sir, Martinez said, meeting Eastwood's eyes in the rearview mirror. We appreciate the insight. They reached Ocean Avenue in less than 2 minutes. Several people stood at the side of the road, pointing down the steep embankment that led to the beach below. The officers pulled over and jumped out of the car, with Eastwood following close behind. When they reached the edge and looked down, they saw a terrifying sight. A silver SUV was teetering on the edge of a steep drop, its front wheels hanging over open air. One wrong move and it would tumble down the rocky slope to the beach 30 feet below. Inside the vehicle, they could see a family, a man and woman in the front seats, and 2 young children in the back. The family was keeping very still, afraid that any movement might send the car over the edge. The father had his arm stretched back, trying to keep his children calm. Fire and rescue are still 6 minutes out, Collins said, checking his watch. Those people don't have 6 minutes, Eastwood said, looking at the precariously balanced vehicle. He was right. The car shifted slightly as they watched, settling a few inches further over the edge. A small gasp went up from the onlookers. We need to secure that car now, Martinez said, already opening the trunk of the patrol car. We have some rope, but it won't be enough to pull the vehicle back. We don't need to pull it back yet, Eastwood said, taking off his jacket. We just need to stop it from going forward until help arrives. The legend rolled up his sleeves, revealing surprisingly muscular forearms for a man his age. The officers were struck by how calm he seemed, how focused. This was a side of Clint Eastwood they had seen in his movies, the hero taking charge, in a crisis, but never expected to witness in real life. Your car, he said, pointing to the patrol vehicle. Back it up to the edge, as close as you safely can. We'll secure the rope from your bumper to theirs. Martinez nodded and quickly repositioned the patrol car. Meanwhile, Collins and Eastwood carefully made their way down the slope to the side of the trapped vehicle. It's going to be okay, Collins called to the family inside. Stay very still, we're going to secure your car. The father nodded, his face pale with fear. The mother was silently crying, trying to hide her tears from the children. The kids, a boy and girl who looked about 8 and 10 years old, stared wide-eyed at the police officer and the famous actor outside their window. Clint Eastwood, the father mouthed in disbelief, momentarily distracted from their dangerous situation. Eastwood gave a small nod, but stayed focused on the task. He and Collins worked quickly to tie the rope securely to the SUV's rear bumper. The car creaked and shifted again, making everyone freeze. "Easy," Eastwood said in that calm, commanding voice. "Slow movements." They finished securing the rope and carefully made their way back up the slope. Together with Officer Martinez, they tied the other end to the patrol car's bumper, creating a temporary anchor for the hanging vehicle. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it might buy them enough time for the rescue team to arrive. As they finished, Eastwood looked at the two officers. The tension of the moment had wiped away the awkwardness from earlier. Now they were just 3 men working together to save lives. In the distance, they could hear the sirens of the approaching fire trucks and rescue vehicles. "They'll be here soon," Martinez said with relief. But just then the ground beneath the SUV shifted. A chunk of soil and rock crumbled away. The rope went taut as the car slipped further forward. "The anchor's not going to hold," Collins said, his voice tight with worry. Eastwood looked at the two officers, his blue eyes intense and focused. "We need a new plan," he said, "and we need it now." The rope creaked as the silver SUV shifted again. Small rocks tumbled down the embankment. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, with people watching anxiously from a safe distance. Everyone could feel the tension in the air. Inside the car, the father was trying to keep his family calm. "Don't move," he told his children in a steady voice. "Help is coming." But time was running out. The ground beneath the front wheels of the SUV continued to crumble. The vehicle was now hanging even further over the edge, with only the rope and the back wheels on solid ground keeping it from falling. Officer Collins looked at the rope with worry. "That's not going to hold much longer." "The rescue team is still 4 minutes out," Officer Martinez added, checking his watch. Clint Eastwood surveyed the scene with a critical eye. At 94, he had seen many dangerous situations, both in real life and in the movies. But this was not a movie set. These were real lives at stake. "We need to get them out now," Eastwood said firmly, "before the car falls." "But how?" Collins asked. "If they move around inside, it might tip the balance." Eastwood pointed to a nearby tree. "We need to create a second anchor point. Get more rope from those people's cars," he said, gesturing to the growing crowd of onlookers. "And we need to secure the front of the vehicle too, not just the back." The officers nodded and quickly moved to action. Martinez approached the crowd, asking for any rope or strong cables people might have in their vehicles. To his surprise, several people immediately went to their cars to help. Meanwhile, Collins and Eastwood carefully made their way closer to the SUV again. "Sir, we're going. To secure your vehicle better," Collins called to the father. "Please continue to stay very still." The father gave a small nod, trying not to move his head too much. The mother had her arms stretched back, holding her children's hands. The kids were silent with fear, their eyes wide as they watched the famous actor and the police officer working to save them. A middle-aged man from the crowd came running over with a thick tow cable. "I use this for my boat," he explained, handing it to Martinez. "It's very strong." "Perfect," Martinez said gratefully. More people brought ropes and cables. Soon the officers had enough to create multiple anchor points. Working together with Eastwood and several volunteers, they secured one end of the tow cable to the front axle of the SUV and the other end to the strong tree nearby. The new setup provided more stability, but the car was still in a dangerous position. They needed to get the family out. "We need to open the back door," Eastwood said. "It's the safest exit point. The weight is balanced toward the back right now." Collins nodded in agreement. "But we need to be extremely careful. One wrong move and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone understood the stakes. Eastwood looked at the officer. "I'll go," he said simply, Mr. Eastwood, Martinez protested, you don't have to do this. We can wait for the rescue team. The legend shook his head. There's no time. I'm lighter than either of you, and I've done my own stunts for years. A small smile crossed his weathered face. Most of them, anyway. Before the officers could argue further, Eastwood was already moving. Despite his age, he moved with surprising agility, carefully making his way down the slope toward the back of the SUV. The crowd watched in amazement. Someone recognized him and whispered, "Is that Clint Eastwood?" The word spread quickly, and soon everyone knew that the Hollywood legend was personally involved in the rescue. When Eastwood reached the back of the SUV, he placed his hand on the trunk to steady himself. He could feel the vehicle wobble slightly under his touch. Looking through the back window, he made eye contact with the two children. He gave them a reassuring nod. "I'm going to open the back door," he called to the family. "When I do, the kids will come out first, one at a time, very slowly." The parents nodded their understanding. Officer Collins, Eastwood called up to the slope. "I need you to come down and help guide the children up." Collins didn't hesitate. He made his way down carefully, joining Eastwood at the back of the SUV. Eastwood reached for the door handle. This was the most dangerous moment. Opening, the door would shift the weight of the car, but they had no choice. "On three," he said quietly to Collins. 1, 2, 3. He pulled the handle and slowly opened the back door. The SUV groaned and shifted slightly, but the multiple ropes held it in place. "Good," Eastwood said. "Now, young lady," he said to the girl, who appeared to be the older of the two children, "I need you to unbuckle very slowly and carefully crawl toward me." The girl looked at her parents for permission. They nodded, though fear was clear in their eyes. Slowly, the girl unbuckled her seatbelt. Moving inch by inch, she crawled across the back seat toward the open door. Every small movement made the car shift slightly. Everyone held their breath. When she reached the door, Eastwood held out his hand. "That's it," he said gently. "You're doing great." The girl took his hand, and with Collins helping, they carefully lifted her out of the car. Collins immediately guided her up the slope to safety, where Officer Martinez was waiting. Next was the boy's turn. He was younger and more frightened, but seeing his sister make it safely gave him courage. Like his sister, he moved slowly toward the door, where Eastwood was waiting with outstretched hands. "Just like in the movies, kid," Eastwood said with a reassuring smile. "You're the brave hero now." The boy managed a small smile back as Eastwood and Collins helped him out of the car and up to safety. With both children safe, it was time for the parents. But this would be even more challenging. The car was balanced precariously, and any significant shift in weight toward the front could send it over the edge, despite the ropes. "Ma'am," Eastwood called to the mother, "you're next. You need to climb carefully into the back seat first." The woman looked terrified but determined. Slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt and began to maneuver between the front seats into the back. Just then, they heard the sound of sirens getting closer. The rescue team was almost there, but they couldn't wait. As the mother made her way into the back seat, the car suddenly lurched forward. One of the ropes snapped with a loud crack. The SUV tilted further over the edge. "Hurry!" Collins shouted. The woman scrambled toward the back door, panic in her eyes. Eastwood reached in and grabbed her arms, pulling her out just as the car shifted again. Collins and Eastwood quickly helped her up the slope, where she immediately embraced her children, tears streaming down her face. Now only the father remained, in the car, which was hanging by just the thickest tow cable and one rope. The situation was critical. "Sir," Eastwood called to the man, "you need to move now, very carefully toward the back." The father began to move, but he was a large man, and his weight was causing the car to tilt even more. The tow cable was stretching, the metal groaning under the strain. Just then, the fire truck and rescue vehicles arrived at the scene. Firefighters jumped out, quickly assessing the situation. But there wasn't time to set up proper equipment. The Kate SUV was about to go over. "Jump!" Eastwood shouted to the father. "Now!" The man didn't hesitate. He lunged for the back door just as the final rope snapped. Eastwood and Collins grabbed his arms, pulling with all their strength as the SUV finally lost its battle with gravity. The car plunged down the embankment, crashing onto the rocks below with a deafening sound of twisting metal and breaking glass. But the father was safe, hanging from the grip of a 94-year-old Hollywood legend and a young police officer who had mocked that same legend just 30 minutes earlier. With the help of the newly arrived firefighters, they pulled the man up to safety, where he collapsed, into the arms of his family. As Eastwood and Collins made their way back up the slope, the crowd that had gathered broke into spontaneous applause. Camera phones were out, capturing the moment when Clint Eastwood helped save a family of 4. The emergency was over. All 4 family members were safe. But the day's events were far from finished, and Officer Martinez and Officer Collins had no idea what was coming next. The scene on Ocean Avenue was chaos. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights lined the road. Paramedics checked the rescued family for injuries. Police officers kept the growing crowd of onlookers at a safe distance. And in the middle of it all stood Clint Eastwood, looking remarkably calm despite having just helped save 4 lives. Officer Martinez and Officer Collins stood nearby, watching as the paramedics wrapped shock blankets around the children. The family was shaken but unharmed. It was nothing short of a miracle. "We need to thank him," Martinez said quietly to his partner, nodding toward Eastwood. Collins nodded, his face serious. "We owe him more than thanks." The 2 officers had experienced a roller coaster of emotions in the past hour. From the embarrassment of mocking a legend to the adrenaline of the rescue, and now to a deep feeling of respect and regret. They walked over to where Eastwood was speaking with the fire chief. "Mr. Eastwood," Martinez began, "we wanted to—" He was interrupted by a loud voice. "Clint Eastwood, can we get a statement?" A news van had arrived at the scene. A reporter, with a microphone and a cameraman, were pushing through the crowd, heading straight for them. More people followed, many with phones out, recording everything. "Great," Collins muttered. "Just what we need." The reporter reached them, her face bright with excitement. "Mr. Eastwood, Lisa Chen from Channel 8 News. Did you just help rescue this family?" Eastwood looked uncomfortable with the attention. He glanced at the officers, then back at the reporter. "The police did the rescuing," he said in his gravelly voice. "I just helped out a little." The reporter wasn't satisfied with this modest answer. She pushed the microphone closer. "Witnesses say you personally helped all 4 family members out of the vehicle before it fell. Would you call yourself a hero today?" Eastwood shook his head. "No. The real heroes are these officers right here." He gestured to Martinez and Collins. They were first on the scene. They knew exactly what to do. The officers exchanged surprised glances. After how they had treated him at the diner, Eastwood was giving them credit for the rescue. The reporter turned to them. "Officers, how does it feel to work alongside a Hollywood legend to save lives today?" Martinez cleared his throat. "Mr. Eastwood showed incredible courage. Without his help and quick thinking, we might not have been able to get everyone out in time." "That's right," Collins added. His experience and calm under pressure were invaluable. The reporter looked back and forth between the officers and Eastwood, sensing there was more to the story. "Did you know Mr. Eastwood would be involved in this rescue when you responded to the call?" There was an awkward pause. Martinez and Collins looked at each other, unsure how to answer without revealing their embarrassing behavior at the diner. Eastwood stepped in smoothly. "We happened to be having breakfast at the same place when the call came in. These officers didn't hesitate for a second. They immediately rushed to help, and I decided to tag along." The reporter's eyes widened. "So this was just a coincidence? You all happened to be having breakfast together?" "Not exactly together," Eastwood said with a small smile, "but in the same diner." Before the reporter could ask more questions, the father of the rescued family approached. He was a tall man with tears in his eyes. "I just wanted to thank all of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my family. I don't know how to repay you." "No need for that," Eastwood said, shaking the man's hand. "Just glad everyone's safe." The man looked at Eastwood with awe. "My kids will never believe they were rescued by Dirty Harry himself." This made everyone laugh, breaking the tension. Even Eastwood cracked a smile. More reporters were arriving. Now, the story of Clint Eastwood helping to rescue a family was spreading quickly. People were gathering, taking pictures, trying to get closer to the Hollywood legend. The police chief arrived and quickly assessed the situation. "Let's move this away from the accident scene," he said. He turned to Eastwood. "Sir, would you like an escort home? I can have these officers take you." Eastwood looked at Martinez and Collins. There was something unfinished between them. "That would be fine," he said with a nod. As the crowd continued to grow, the officers led Eastwood to their patrol car. They opened the front passenger door for him this time, not the back seat. It was a small gesture of respect. The drive through, Carmel was quiet at first. None of them knew quite what to say. The events of the morning hung in the air between them. Finally, Collins spoke up from the driver's seat. "Mr. Eastwood, about what happened at the diner." He trailed off, not sure how to continue. "We were completely out of line," Martinez finished for him. "The things we said were disrespectful and unprofessional. We're very sorry." Eastwood looked out the window at the passing scenery for a moment before responding. "You know," he said, slowly, "in my movies I've played a lot of tough guys who don't take any nonsense. Dirty Harry, the man with no name." The officers nodded, wondering where he was going with this. "But those are just characters," Eastwood continued. "In real life, I've learned that you can't judge people too quickly, not by how they look or even how they act in a single moment." He turned to look at them. "You two proved that today. When it mattered, you didn't hesitate. You put yourselves at risk to save that family. That tells me more about who you really are than a few jokes at an old man's expense." The officers were stunned by his generosity. "Still," Martinez said, "we should have known better. We're supposed to treat everyone with respect, whether they're famous or not." Eastwood nodded. "That's true, but everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do next." As they drove through the quiet streets of Carmel, the conversation shifted. Eastwood asked them about their work as police officers in the town where he had once been mayor. They talked about changes in the community over the years. The tension between them gradually faded. When they reached Eastwood's home, a beautiful property overlooking the ocean, Collins parked the car and they all got out. "Would you like to come in for a moment?" Eastwood asked, surprising them both. "I have something I want to show you." The officers exchanged glances. This was the last thing they had expected after the events of the morning. They followed Eastwood into his home, feeling both nervous and curious. Inside, the house was tastefully decorated with memorabilia from Eastwood's long career in film. Movie posters, awards, and photographs lined the walls. It was like walking through a museum dedicated to American cinema. Eastwood led them to a small study and motioned for them to sit down. From a desk drawer, he pulled out an old black and white photograph. "This was taken in 1971, he said, handing it to them. "During the filming of Dirty Harry." The photograph showed a much younger Eastwood on set, standing next to a police officer in uniform. "That's Officer Jim Ryan," Eastwood explained. "He was my technical advisor for the film. He taught me how a real police officer would hold a gun, how they would enter a room, how they would talk to suspects." He paused, looking at the photograph with a hint of nostalgia. "Jim became a good friend. He once told me something I never forgot. He said, 'A badge doesn't make you a cop. How you act when people are in danger, that's what makes you a cop.'" Eastwood looked up at Martinez and Collins. "You two proved that today. You're good cops." The officers were speechless. This moment, sitting in Clint Eastwood's study receiving his approval after they had mocked him hours earlier, felt surreal. "Thank you, sir," Collins finally managed to say. "That means a lot coming from you." Martinez nodded in agreement. "More than you know." Eastwood put the photograph away and stood up. "Well, I'm sure you need to get back to work. There will be reports to file after all that excitement." As they walked to the door, Eastwood's phone rang. He answered it briefly, then turned to the officers with a slight smile. "That was my agent," he said. "Apparently our little rescue mission is all over the news." They want me to do interviews. Will you? Martinez asked. Eastwood shook his head. Not my style, but... He paused, seeming to consider something. There is one thing I might do if you're interested. 1 month had passed since that eventful morning at Marie's diner. Officer Ryan Martinez and Officer James Collins were on their regular patrol through Carmel by the Sea. The small coastal town was peaceful as usual, with tourists walking along, the picturesque streets and locals going about their business. Can you believe it's been a month already? Collins asked as they drove slowly past the spot on Ocean Avenue where they had helped rescue the family. Feels like it was just yesterday, Martinez replied, looking at the repaired guardrail that had been installed after the accident. A lot had changed for the two officers in that month. What had started as the most embarrassing day of their careers had somehow turned into one of the most meaningful. After their visit to Clint Eastwood's home, the legendary actor had surprised them with an unexpected offer. He was working with the Carmel Police Department to create a short safety film about the dangerous coastal roads in the area. He wanted Martinez and Collins to be part of it. I need some real officers who know what they're doing, Eastwood had told them. Not actors pretending to be cops. At first, they thought he was joking. Why would he want to work with the two officers who had mocked him at the diner? But Eastwood was serious. He saw something in them during the rescue, a genuine dedication to protecting people that he wanted to capture on film. The safety video had been completed last week. It was simple but effective, showing the dangers of the coastal roads and what to do in case of an emergency. Eastwood had directed it himself, with the officers providing authentic expertise. The video was now being shown in local schools, tourist, information centers, and online. Working with Eastwood had been an experience they would never forget. He was professional, focused, and surprisingly funny when the cameras weren't rolling. He told them stories about his days as mayor of Carmel and his long career in Hollywood. But most importantly, he treated them with respect, never once bringing up their behavior at the diner. As they continued their patrol, Collins pointed ahead. Look, there's Marie's. The diner where it all began stood at the corner, looking exactly the same as it had a month ago. But the officers' feelings about the place had completely changed. Should we stop for coffee? Martinez asked. Collins nodded. Might as well. It's almost break time anyway. They parked the patrol car and walked into the diner. The bell jingled above the door, just as it had that morning. Marie looked up from behind the counter and smiled when she saw them. Well, if it isn't my two favorite officers, she said warmly. Your usual booth is open. The officers nodded and made their way to their regular spot by the window. A lot had changed with Marie, too. After she had seen how they handled the emergency and how they had made amends with Eastwood, she had forgiven them for their behavior that day. 2 coffees coming right up, Marie said, bringing over the pot. Any news about that family you rescued? They're doing well, Martinez replied. They sent a thank you card to the station last week. The kids drew pictures of the rescue. With Mr. Eastwood front and center, I bet, Marie said with a smile. Collins nodded. The boy drew him with a cape, called him Super Clint. They all laughed at that. The story of Clint Eastwood helping to rescue a family had made national news. For a few days, Carmel had been the center of attention, with reporters trying to get interviews with everyone involved. But Eastwood had kept a low profile as usual, and eventually the media moved on to other stories. As they sipped their coffee, the diner's door opened again. The officers looked up, and to their surprise, Clint Eastwood himself walked in, wearing the same simple cap and weather jacket he had worn that day. The diner fell quiet as people recognized him. Eastwood nodded politely to the other customers, but headed straight for the officer's booth. Mind if I join you? He asked. Of course not, sir, Collins said, sliding over to make room. Eastwood sat down and ordered a black coffee from Marie, who was beaming at him. I saw the final version of the safety video yesterday, Eastwood said once Marie had gone to get his coffee. Good work, both of you. It's already getting a lot of views online. Thanks to you, Martinez said. Your name attached to it makes a big difference. Eastwood shrugged. People will watch anything for a minute or two. The important thing is that they remember the safety information. They talked for a while about the video and its impact. Then Eastwood reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I got this in the mail yesterday," he said, sliding it across the table to them. "Thought you might want to see it." Collins opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The letter was from the family they had rescued. The photograph showed the parents and the two children all smiling, standing in front of their new car. "They wrote to thank me again," Eastwood explained. "But they mentioned you two as well. Said they'll never forget how all three of us worked together to save them." The officers read the letter, touched by the family's words of gratitude. It was a powerful reminder of why they had become police officers in the first place, to help people, to make a difference. "We're planning to frame the safety video poster at the station," Collins said, handing the letter back. "The chief is really proud of it." "And of you two," Eastwood added. "He told me you've been recommended for a commendation." The officers exchanged surprised glances. This was the first they had heard of it. "For the rescue?" Martinez asked. Eastwood nodded. "That, and for how you've been using the experience to help educate the community about road safety. The chief says you've gone above and beyond, volunteering for school presentations and community meetings." It was true. After working on the video with Eastwood, they had become passionate about preventing similar accidents. They had visited local schools to talk to students about safety and had helped organize community workshops on emergency preparedness. "We just wanted to make something good come out of it all," Collins said simply. Eastwood looked at them with approval. That's what matters in the end, taking something negative and turning it into something positive. The three men sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking their coffee. The awkwardness and embarrassment of their first meeting was long gone, replaced by a genuine mutual respect. A young couple at a nearby table kept glancing over at them, clearly recognizing Eastwood. Finally, the man gathered his courage and approached. "Excuse me, Mr. Eastwood," he said nervously. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but my wife and I are huge fans. Would it be possible to get a quick photo?" In the past, the officers might have been annoyed at the interruption, but now they understood better. Eastwood was a legend, and people would always be excited to meet him. To their surprise, Eastwood gestured to include them. "Only if my friends here can join us," he said. "These officers are the real heroes of Carmel." The young couple eagerly agreed, and soon the three of them were posing for a photo, Clint Eastwood in the middle, with Officer Martinez and Officer Collins on either side. As the couple thanked them and returned to their table, Collins shook his head in amazement. "If someone had told me a month ago that we'd be sitting here with Clint Eastwood, being called heroes, I would have said they were crazy." "Life takes strange turns," Eastwood said with a small smile. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "I guess the lesson is to treat everyone with respect, whether they're famous or not. You never know who might end up saving your life, or helping you save someone else's, or who might become a friend," Eastwood added, raising his coffee cup in a small toast. The officers raised their cups too, thinking about how much had changed since that morning a month ago, from ridiculing a legend to working alongside him, from embarrassment to respect, from regret to redemption. As they sat there in Marie's diner, the place where it all began, they knew that this unlikely friendship would be one of the most valuable things they would take away from their careers, a reminder that it's never too late to make things right, and that true character is revealed not in moments of comfort, but in times of challenge. And for Clint Eastwood, it was yet another remarkable chapter in an already extraordinary life. Proof that even at 94, he could still surprise people, still make a difference, and still teach important lessons about respect, forgiveness, and what it really means to be a hero. The end.